What would you say if I tell you that back in the 80s, MTV refused to play Michael Jackson's Thriller because of his skin color, and Columbia Records threatened to ban MTV from playing Springsteen, Rolling Stones and other rock giants if they don't play Michael Jackson? What would you say if I tell you that in the 80s it was perfectly normal thing that pro-white radio stations didn't play black artists? What would you say if I tell you that the record labels invested over 70% more money in male artists? Today it's easy to talk when Beyoncé, Rihanna, Bruno Mars and Drake are among the biggest artists in the world, and we talk about all the great black artists from the past as legends, but if we lived in that time we would see an undisputable different picture. Our legends had a hard time. Music industry in the 80s was starving for a black female singer appealing to all audiences. Like Diana Ross did in the 60s and the 70s, we had an amazing black female singers like the Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin, but she never reached stardom or popularity or ruled the charts like Diana Ross did alone or with the Supremes, and soul music, to be honest, wasn't very much consumed by the white audience. In the 70s we had Donna Summer, yet disco music was closely associated with substance abuse and promiscuity, and for the people of color, disco was not music that represent their music culture and heritage like R&B and soul did. With the emergence of the new TV channel MTV that defined music taste for the new generations, music giants were searching for someone new because the last black American sweetheart that did all for music to the movies and was accepted by everyone in fact was Diana Ross, so they needed someone fresh with guts and soul, nurtured in a church but with specific looks. Thin, tall and beautiful, something between Diana Ross and Aretha. In 1983, Clive Davis presented his new discovery, Whitney Houston. They began to work on her first album. She had issues with the recording debut album because producers claimed that she sounded too black, so she re-recorded her songs until finishing product was just the right one. Gut and soul but fit in a certain package appealing to everyone. Whitney Houston released her first studio album, Whitney Houston, in 1985, and that album became the best-selling female debut album of all time at that time and the best-selling female album of the 80s, sold around between 25 and 28 million copies to date. This album had 3 #1 hit singles, and she became the first black woman to receive heavy rotation on the network following the success of the How Will I Know video. Following the Whitney Houston breakthrough, other African-American women such as Janet Jackson and Anita Baker followed that. Anita Baker commented that because of Whitney, there was opening for me. For radio stations, black female singers aren't taboo anymore. Time magazine said, quote, "Young Houston had to fight airplay with hard rockers. The young lady had to stand in the locker room full of macho rock. The soul struther had to seduce music audience that annoyed few black artists with superstardom. She was a phenomenon. Her success has helped other blacks, other women, other smooth singers to find a reception in pop marketplace." Whitney Houston released her second studio album Whitney in 1987, sold approximately 22 million copies. It debuted at #1 in 1987, and with 4 more #1 hit songs. Whitney had 7 consecutive #1 hit songs, more than any other artist in history. Whitney Houston was able to handle big contemporary ballads, dance pop and slick urban soul, and result was an across-the-board appeal that we haven't seen since Diana Ross. She was, alongside Michael Jackson and Madonna, one of the crucial figures of the hybridized pop in the 80s. Although her strategy was far less radical than of her peers, Michael Jackson and Madonna were willing to let their production speak more loudly than their voices. Michael Jackson and Madonna built worldviews around their voices, and Whitney's voice was a worldview. End of the 80s were a bit hard on Whitney because people of color accused her of being a sellout for not sticking to her roots and sounding too white. Whitney released more contemporary R&B album, I'm Your Baby Tonight, with addition of 2 more #1 hit songs. And then, on January 27, in 1991, 10 days into Persian Gulf War, Whitney Houston took the field of Tampa Stadium and performed the Star-Spangled Banner. National Football League placed her rendition as #1 of the greatest moments in NFL history. Her rendition entered the Billboard chart twice, once in 1991 and in 2001 it reached #6 in the US. Yes, the national anthem on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. Whitney's first film role was in The Bodyguard, released in 1992 and co-starring Kevin Costner. Houston's mainstream appeal allowed people to look past the interracial picture between her character and Costner's, and yes, that was still a thing in the 90s too. Film became the highest grossing motion picture of that year, and the soundtrack became the best-selling soundtrack of all time, and its leading single becoming the best-selling female single of all time from Physical Era with sales over 20 million copies to date. Houston swept all the award in the award season in 1993 and 1994, and to date, Whitney is the most awarded solo female artist in history. Her triumph of this era was South Africa concert, where Houston performed 3 concerts in South Africa to honor President Mandela, playing to over 200,000 people. This made her the first major musician to visit newly united and apartheid-free nation. The event was considered the nation's biggest media event since the inauguration of Nelson Mandela. She starred in Waiting to Exhale, whose soundtrack was sold over 12 million copies, and she gained another #1 hit song, Shoop Shoop Song. Later on, she starred in a Christmas family film, The Preacher's Wife, with Denzel Washington, and she was paid $10 million, making her the highest paid black actress in that time. Soundtrack of that album became the best-selling gospel album of all time. In the late 90s, with released hip-hop influenced album My Love Is Your Love, they sold between 10 and 15 million copies, and then a unprecedented deal of $100 million contract. Whitney paired up with another certified diva, Mariah Carey, for the Prince of Egypt soundtrack, and When You Believe later won an Academy Award for Best Original Song. Following a new millennium, she released the Greatest Hits album that sold over 16 million copies. She was living the American dream. She did everything what music industry imagined and more, crushed barriers for black female artists, and with her voice she influenced every female singer that came after her. From Celine Dion to Mariah Carey, Christina Aguilera, Beyoncé, Lady Gaga, Adele, Pink, Ariana Grande, making her the most influential female vocalist in the past 35 years. Houston was a powerful mezzo-soprano and was commonly referred as the voice in reference to her exceptional vocal talent. The New York Times stated that she always had a great big voice, a technical marvel from its velvety depths to its ballistic middle register to its ringing and heights. She was a brilliant performer, and her live shows often eclipsed her studio recordings. But who was Whitney Houston, the person, not the diva? While the glory of her voice and commanding stage presence propelled Whitney Houston into pop stratosphere, her demons kept dragging her down. A powerful undertow of drugs and toxic relationship, and the industry who was in desperate need of having someone like her, and all that people and friends turned their heads away and no one cared anymore. She served the purpose. She did it all, took it where no one else did it before, and set a new standard. A woman, quote, whose voice and impact stand like a monument upon the landscape of 20th century pop, defining architecture of the times, sheltering the dreams of millions and inspiring and climbing careers of countless imitators. And on the end, all we saw was a troubled woman, married to a jealous, insecure man who hated her success, and a man of whom she dimmed her light in order to be Mrs. Brown. For the record labels, first she was too black, later on for black people she was too white, torn apart in need to satisfy the world. She eventually lost her biggest gift, her voice. Cited as American national treasure, unable to get help, died with family of vultures around her. What will she be remembered for? For being a major trailblazer for women of color, or trailblazer for women in general in music industry, for popularizing music genres and stylistic singing to the people of all colors, a woman of monumental talent who inspired everyone, record breaker, game changer that defined music industry, or a cautionary tale of a woman who was given a purpose and then destroyed by her own creators. Whitney Elizabeth Houston. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe, follow me on my Instagram account, and support our channel by becoming a patron on Patreon, and with a bunch of rewards help us creating together a great content with your favorite artists. Bye!